Sergei Lavrov has been in Turkey and he's done a very interesting press conference and he's addressed the issues of the Ukraine war and also of the war in Israel with Gaza and with Lebanon with Hamas and uh, the broader diplomatic chess game unfolding across Europe. And his statements provide an unfiltered look at Russia's view of the conflict, its perceptions of Western involvement, and the potential diplomatic overtures that might develop in Istanbul. So he said that diplomats will meet in Istanbul on the 27th to discuss the problems of the previous US administration, with Turkey acting as as a mediator. He's forcefully dismissed the notion of peacekeeping forces in Ukraine, a concept floated by Donald Trump and by Keir Starmer. His response was unequivocal. We're not considering any option relating to peacekeeping forces. I do not know what Macron has said, but Washington has not properly assessed its role. However, from what I've read, Trump stated that a peacekeeping force could only be deployed with the approval of both sides. The approach put forward, particularly by the United Kingdom and France, aims to further fuel the war. He said the peacekeeping mission that the EU wants to implant in Ukraine, we don't think of any options because no one has bothered to ask us about what we think. I think that's an interesting change in the rhetoric, because previously Russia had said it ruled out any possibility of peacekeeping forces from any nation that was loosely linked to NATO. Now it's saying, well, we haven't really been asked, and if we are asked, Trump has said that we would have the opportunity of approving, of vetoing this if we're asked. The stance reinforces Russia's position, in part about not wanting NATO members anywhere near its borders, but in part it seems to be a modifying, a relaxing of its principles. There's a lot of posturing going on. So yes, on the one hand, it might see peacekeeping forces as a hostile act rather than a stabilizing force, but it doesn't seem absolutely, in what Lavrov is saying, to be completely ruling this out. Lavrov's framing of the UK and France as warmongers aligns with the Kremlin's broader narrative that Europe is not seeking peace, but rather prolonging the war at Ukraine's expense. And he was quite clear that European nations adding more weapons deals to Ukraine, the EU announcing military packages that encourage Kyiv to continue the war in Russia. Why not let Ukraine simply be overrun by Russian forces? Why don't you let them die? It is essentially the unstated central plank of what Lavrov is saying, but it's not quite as aggressive as it seems to have been in the past. He's arguing that arms shipments to Ukraine persist despite shifting political landscapes, and he's repeatedly referenced comments from the Danish Prime Minister, he said the clearest statement came from the Danish Prime Minister, who said, in this situation, peace is worse than war for Ukraine. And by invoking this, Lavrov has tried to bolster Russia's claim that European leaders are prioritizing their global strategy, over Ukrainian stability, that Europe is provoking Russia. However, this remark oversimplifies the context, and Friedrichsen's comment more likely reflects concerns about that a premature peace dictated on Moscow's terms could leave Ukraine vulnerable to future aggression and leave Europe vulnerable to future aggression. Lavrov didn't shy away from commenting on internal German politics, particularly the rise of Friedrich Merz as Germany's next chancellor. He noted Merz's openness to supplying Ukraine with Taurus missile systems and ominously remarked that decision revives past memories. And while cryptic, the statement's a clear allusion to historical tensions between Russia and Germany, and the Kremlin has long attempted to exploit German hesitation about military intervention, and Lavrov's comment, therefore, is likely to stir unease among German policymakers, wary of being perceived as escalating the conflict. In a rare moment of diplomatic engagement, Lavrov confirmed that the delegations from the US and Russia would meet in Istanbul to discuss normalizing the operations. He says the important thing is to get rid of the problems that led to the conflict, to get rid of the core problems. He said Trump understands this. US and Russian delegations will meet in Istanbul tomorrow to discuss the functioning of the embassies. And then he says our diplomats will address issues concerning the operations of the US embassy in Moscow, which have been affected by unlawful actions imposed by the previous US administration to create artificial barriers against the Russian embassy's activities, measures to which we naturally responded in kind. And while this meeting might seem a technical discussion, it's notable given the broader freeze in US-Russian diplomatic relations and the fact that both sides are willing to engage, even on narrow bureaucratic matters, signals an attempt, however small, to maintain and develop some level of diplomatic functionality. And his visit coincided with the 3-year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and his meeting with Erdogan in Ankara focused on the war, regional stability, and bilateral relations. And Turkey's position remains delicate, of course. It continues to arm Ukraine while maintaining an open dialogue with Russia. And this meeting underscores Ankara's ongoing balancing act, serving as both a conduit for Russian interests and a NATO ally supporting Ukraine's sovereignty. He also talked about Israel and saying that Israel's behavior towards Palestine in both Gaza and in Lebanon, he said its military behavior is confusing. It's not. It's against the agreement that has been made and is therefore unlawful. The agreement showed what should happen. Maybe Israel wants to slow this down, to remove Palestinians from their homeland. And if this continues, this is a ticking time bomb, he says, and said that it's important to continue talking with Qatar, but he wants to put Israel back on track. And at the same time, he wants to discourage the EU from its bellicosity. Lavrov's remarks in Ankara, of course, reaffirm Russia's commitment to its war narrative and its propaganda by dismissing peacekeeping forces, accusing Europe of warmongering, warning Germany against military escalation, maintaining a diplomatic back channel with the US. Russia signals its continued defiance against Western intervention while keeping select doors open for negotiation. And it's that last idea, the fact that Russia and Lavrov are keeping doors open. That is the positive. I don't think one should pay too much attention to some of the aggressive language. And I think it's interesting that Lavrov is, in a way, deflecting the issue onto Israel, which could so easily be addressed to him and to Russia. And again, I would caution against anybody taking a sort of tribal approach to this. What Lavrov says about Israel is absolutely true. What Lavrov says about Europe, I think, is less true. And it's perfectly possible for one individual to say true things and false things. I think the way he is managing his comments is telling, because there seems to be a softening of language, and a sort of just a very small opening for opportunity to get to a point where where peace can be established. And Lavrov is, of course, an experienced and extremely polished negotiator and diplomat. And I think Erdogan and Turkey as positioning themselves as mediation here are doing exactly the right thing, and I think it's very positive to see that happening, and to be and to be able to witness some of that, and to see this covered in the Turkish press. So far, it's not covered in the British or European press, which I think is a great shame. But let's see what happens tomorrow.